Matthew 13, 24 to 30, 36 to 43. He put another parable before them, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while his men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared also. And the servants of the master of the house came and said to him, 'Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have weeds?' He said to them, 'An enemy has done this.' So the servants said to him, 'Then do you want us to go and gather them?' But he said, 'No, lest in gathering the weeds you root up the wheat along with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And at harvest time I will tell the reapers, gather the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn.' Then he left the crowds and went into the house, and his disciples came to him, saying, 'Explain to us the parable of the weeds of the field.' He answered, 'The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed is the sons of the kingdom. The weeds are the sons of the evil one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are angels. But as the weeds are gathered and burned with fire, so will it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all lawbreakers, and throw them into the fiery furnace. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears, let him hear.'" This is the word of God.
In July and August, we're in a series on parables from the Gospel of Matthew. The parables are these fictional stories, illustrations that help you understand this new life Jesus is inviting us to live. There's not just one parable, but there's many parables because the Christian life is complicated. Navigating this world can be complex. And these stories spark our imagination and help train us in what to expect and how to apply what we see in the Christian life. And the reason Jesus tells these parables, many of them describing the kingdom of heaven. So he comes with a message, the kingdom of heaven is arriving with him. There's something about a future reality breaking its way into the present. And it's good news. There's something about God's healing, God's help, God's goodness that starts to work. And yet, one of the things Jesus trains us about is it's not instantaneous. There's an overlap. He brings a reality of the kingdom of heaven into the kingdoms of this world, so it's for all people and all nations. And it works truly, powerfully, and for good, but slowly and in ways that we can't always understand. And so these parables are often helping us navigate these things, certainly this parable, the dynamic of this overlap, of the confusion of we live in a corrupt world that has goodness in it. We're told that there's more goodness, and yet corruption remains, and it can be discouraging, it can be confusing. This parable helps set our expectations and reminds us to have faith, to press on, and helps us navigate some of those things. That the clash of these two kingdoms, these two realities, as we're trying to figure out this new life where we have to unlearn, relearn, put into practice, but there's nuance, there's complexity, and we need to figure it out. So if, for example, if you live in New York City and you visit Tokyo for the first time, Tokyo is a major city. There's a lot about living here that prepares you for that. There will be tall buildings, there will be lots of people, there's public transport. You will likely be able to figure out how to get your way around, and yet it's very much like New York City, but different enough that there will be some things that could be confusing. And so you get on the their subway-ish system, whatever term that they use, and you are pleasantly surprised to find out that they have signs in English. So you're not going to get lost, but then you get on the bus, and then you realize you can't understand where to get off, and you do get lost. And you go into a restaurant, and you know that if you order food and are willing to pay for it, they'll serve you, and then you realize you don't know if you're supposed to leave a tip. And there are all these things where it's the same but different, and it leaves you questioning certain things. It could leave you confused, lost, offending, unnecessarily offended, and that's just part of that reality. it's somewhat similar. Jesus comes and says, I'm calling you to a radically different life. But in what way is it radically different? Are we supposed to quit our jobs? No, we're supposed to work like other people work. We could work in the same fields. Are we not supposed to have interests? No, we could have hobbies and interests. Can we go to the movies? Well, maybe certain movies you shouldn't, some you can, but it's not as easy. This radically different life actually is a lot like ordinary life. But the different priorities, the different goals, the different trajectories where the Bible lays out, there's ways that lead to life and ways that lead to death. But for a while, they overlap and they look similar, but we're called to a trajectory, and along the way, it's confusing. And so, for instance, over the years, we have many international students who come because there's some opportunity here to go to a great university like Columbia or to have time in a great city like New York. And there are always on the margins, the extremes of some people that so love it, they hate where they're from, they're never going back. And we occasionally get some people that so hate it here, they can't wait to get back with their degree in hand and never return. For most people, there's a little bit of a middle. There's something good that they're here for. And then the process of being in a new place, you realize, oh, there's certain things that are not here that I just assumed would be. And now I'm longing for home, and yet there are certain things that I'm glad are different. And needing to navigate that. The Christian life could be somewhat like that. Jesus calls us into a new life where he promises it's remarkable and amazing, and there should be enough good for you to stay at it, but there's always enough that's confusing where you wonder, was my life better off before? Am I missing something? And certainly the parable we're looking at today, the wheat and the weeds, raises the fact that it's not just that there are differences that we need to get used to, but there are problems in the world. And whenever we have a touch point with evil, it's confusing. So it's confusing theologically for people who are trying to follow God, believing that following God brings goodness, and then there's a touch point with evil and we can't make sense of things. But the reality is evil is a problem for everyone, not just people trying to believe in God or trying to live a moral life. But there's something about war or abuse or crime or mental health issues or diseases or broken relationships, any of the number of things that we all have points of contact with that make it hard to have a worldview that makes sense, that's coherent, in particular where Jesus is raising the bar, saying, I'm calling you to a greater life of energy and devotion and goodness with greater outcomes. While we have these touch points, and sometimes when they come in too close to our lives, it leaves us utterly confused. And therefore, this parable is helpful to us. Jesus is preparing us by reminding us that we live in this mixed world where there are overlaps, but there are things that if we understand will keep us from being completely shipwrecked or being used to participate in what we should not. And so that's some of what we'll look at as we go through this passage. So I'm going to talk about three things: God's plan, God's patience, and God's wisdom. So as we try to think of what can we take from this passage, those headings will give us plenty to think about this next week. So I'm going to begin with God's plan. So one of the things to note in this parable, it's a parable that involves an interruption. So you have a farmer who sows seed. Why? Because sowing seed is fun. It's a new hobby. He wants to start the sowing seed Instagram. No, he wants a harvest. He has a goal. He's doing this as the hard work towards the ends of having food for eating, for economics. And then there's an interruption. Weeds show up, and the way the parable is told, an enemy has come to try to undermine what he's doing. It could be a competitor, a fellow farmer. It could be somebody that just resents that individual and is spiteful. It could be just a terrible human being who likes bringing devastation. The parable doesn't tell us why this enemy did it, but we get the response of the sower, which is that he's going to have to deal with that interruption. And this is daily existence. Most interruptions are minor annoyances, but when you have these big interruptions that feel like an enemy has come into your life in some cosmic way, so you book tickets for your vacation where you can't get to wait to get to a relaxing place, and you are wise enough not to book it out of Newark Airport where there's one air traffic controller trying to run the entire system. And so you say, I'm going to go to LaGuardia Airport, and nobody told you, if there's a rainstorm in LaGuardia Airport, there is not going to be a flight out of that airport. So Sunday night, you can't wait to wake up the next morning in Palm Beach wherever, you got your package, and then all the flights are canceled, and because all of the flights were canceled, there's no flights on Monday, and so you're rebooked on Tuesday, and that expensive 7-day package, you're losing 2 days worth, and that interruption, it could then ruin the rest of your vacation. Rather than getting there Wednesday and saying, I'm so glad I'm finally here, you could spend the whole week ruined by the resentment. These interruptions, it's ordinary life. It's the subway that doesn't come, it's the stranger that just does something mean, and it's the things that we sign up for, but they have an effect on us. But one of the effects they have is they become the main narrative. Then instead of, here's me and my vacation, there's he and me and my hating the airline companies and the city that I live in. One thing that we see with this farmer, he gets news that there's weeds in his field, and he knows that he sowed good seed. He doesn't change his agenda. He doesn't become a soldier instead of a farmer. He doesn't say, my job is now to find my enemy and kill him and destroy the weeds. But he stays committed to his goal, which is, I planted wheat to have a harvest, and what I'm going to do to see that harvest through, and with that goal, what does it mean for me to then deal with the problem that's here? So verse 24, Jesus puts before them another parable, saying, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. So that's his intention, that's his ability. The farmer sows seed that is good for his desired outcome. Verse 28, where did these weeds come from? The way the parable is told to instruct us, an enemy has done this. And verse 38, Jesus' interpretation, the weeds are the sons of the evil one. The enemy who sowed them is the devil. So the word devil in Greek is diabolos. You could think of like diabolical or other ways that the word shows up. One of the shades, one of the hints, if you were to translate this Greek word diabolos, slanderer. This figure in the Bible, this evil person in the Bible, one of the, there's the concept of the Satan, the accuser, the adversary, that talks about this force at work in the world. The concept of the devil could mean various things, this evil figure, but the slanderer, the one who comes in and sows weeds, who goes into something good in order to ruin it. And there's a certain sense, I don't think this was Jesus' intention, but this parable does kind of follow the narrative of Scripture as a whole. That in the beginning of the Bible, the opening chapters, we meet God who in his goodness is intent on creating good. And when he completes the work of creation on the sixth day, he's completing his work, but he hasn't finished creation. He creates a world with potential, humanity in his image who are to imitate him, and to thrive by being like God, by finding things to do and ordering them and using your skill and your wisdom and moving things towards life and goodness. And so that's how the Bible begins. That's the story. That's what human history should be. And then Genesis 3, there's an interruption. There's a slanderer who comes in to put weeds, to put what doesn't belong in there. This good God that has given you wisdom and instruction and potential, is he really good? Is he not withholding things from you? And that slander is effective, to doubt God, to turn from God, to think I know better than God. And so the story is, now you have this world that God has made with its goodness, and some evil, some adversary, some enemy, some slanderer has come in with this diabolical plan to make this good world now a place of misery and suffering. Is the goodness still there? Yes. But the suffering is overlapping with it. And in this parable, at some point they realize that the weeds are there, but it's been growing for quite a while. You can't tell the difference between the wheat and the weeds. And by the time you can tell the difference, if it's grown tall enough to start to distinguish itself, the roots have gone deep enough. So now if you want to take the weeds out, you're also potentially going to destroy the wheat. So now we have a situation where somebody has come in to ruin what's good, and it's effective. And so the picture that we get here is God then doesn't become, his agenda is not do everything you can to destroy the weeds. But now we need to figure out, what do we do given that there are weeds? Because our goal is not to destroy weeds, our goal is to make sure that we have the harvest. If our plan to destroy the weeds will destroy the good, then we're going to find a different plan. And so God doesn't fall for the bait that we fall for, which is when evil comes into our life, that becomes your focus, your obsession, your agenda. And eventually you lose sight of why you're fighting evil. You lose sight of good, you lose sight of something proactive. And that seems to be a little bit of what's going on in our current climate. I was a college student in the early 90s, and back then, the framework, the way of thinking was cultural relativism. Understandably so. How do you live in a diverse society where we moralize everything, and therefore we judge people and we mistreat them? Well, this idea of relativism had so much potential. The idea that, you know what, not everything is moral, and if somebody is a little bit late, it's not your judgment that they're lazy or that they've disrespected you. Maybe they function a little bit differently, and if you have understanding of that, then you don't have to deal with unnecessarily anger, emotion, dividing up. And there was a lot to that, a lot of understanding, a lot of ways of getting past unnecessary conflict. But many people back then said, but the problem is, but sometimes there is right or wrong, and societies don't do nuance well. And so if the basic goal is things are relative, that becomes the new paradigm where then the ultimate sin was being judgmental. So for Christians in the early 90s, the idea was Jesus who says, follow me and I will teach you the way of being right. Well, if you think you're right and others are wrong, well then you're not nuanced enough and we're going to reject you. But there were lots of people that said morally, if we can't clarify and name evil, then calling all things relative allows people intent on evil to continue their evil. So the pendulum has swung the other way. The lesson was learned. The generations have said, this has been not everything is evil, but some things are. And if it is, we don't want to cover it up and excuse it. But now we're moving to the direction where everything is moral. So if the CEO of Nike, if there's an announcement last night that there was a scandal, you better not show up today wearing Nike sneakers or you are complicit. You didn't know? You need to go on social media and show that you're burning the sneakers to stand against, and you have to admit, I was wrong, I supported this company. And that's the new ethic. There's no nuance, that there's now clear right and wrong, and you don't have a minute to figure out which is which. And so if the news breaks, there are quickly two sides. Which side are you on? And the thing that the two sides agree on is we equally hate anyone who's not on our side. So let's conspire together. If you are still trying to figure this out because it's complex, you are the worst human being. And then there's us who are going to fight it out once we get rid of you. That's what it could feel like. Christian morality is not passive. It's not allowing evil to go on. There are times that we need to act quickly, decisively, clearly. But sometimes we can't tell what's right. And by the time we can, the first instinct is not necessarily the right solution. And that's where the pendulum has gone. We're currently in a place, so our political situation, how do you have a campaign? You have to say something aspirational for people's emotions to get them excited about something, but basically the heart of political campaigning these days is there are people that we all hate and we're going to destroy them. And what we're doing is we're moving towards a sense in which our main goal in society is just to destroy whatever is not good. Let's start to be quick about deciding what's not good. Let's act quickly, and we're on a trajectory to destroying one another. Christians get pulled into this. And so you look at whatever the political situations are, and there are Christians that don't look any different going right into the extremes. And there needs to be some willingness to resist, to say, you know what, where things are clear and we need to be courageous and act, we need to show up. But if there's something that doesn't need to be decided in the next 10 minutes, we're not going to fall for the bait that moralizes to say that actually being thoughtful and careful and doing something nuanced, because our goal is not just to destroy anything in our lives or anyone that disagrees with us, but our goal is the good of the whole, to live according to the ways of God's kingdom. And sometimes we need to wait, sometimes we need to think, sometimes we need to talk, and there's a difference between apathy, passivity, but also hastiness. And so this parable reminds us that God governs a world that he created good, where evil comes into it, and we tend to think God just doesn't care. And the Bible is clear, God does care. Well, maybe God can't do anything about it. God is doing something about it. But our impatience is not changing God's agenda. God is still going to fulfill the plans that he has made from the beginning, which is a glorious, fulfilled reality with people who are redeemed in a new society. And the process of getting there, Jesus is training his disciples. It requires patience, nuance. It's difficult. But God is committed to fulfilling that for which he has purposed. I think there's something for us to recognize, unlike the current political climate. Jesus comes with a positive vision, but the Bible presents Jesus, here's a human being. And you're trying to think of what does it look like to be a human. We are all in God's image. He is the image of the invisible God. So watch him. See what he does. Imitate him. May your life become more like him. And it's not just one person, but there's a New Jerusalem, a society where people, they relate to their possessions differently. And their priorities and what they love is different. And how they use their time is different. And so we get this vision that we're told this is where God is leading us to. And then we're instructed, here are the careful things of realigning your life and learning and being different, and just be patient, stay with it. And over time, God's work will powerfully make progress. But there are going to be moments where you're confused, where you don't know what happens, where an enemy does something, and see what God is offering you rather than getting hung up on, I just need to kill everything. Jesus is inviting us to something proactive, to do things. And so what does it look like to do that? And then, without losing sight of that, take each of the evil installments that come up and think, what is it faithful? Is this something to wait on? Is this something to think about solving? Is this something to address quickly and swiftly? We do that out of the paradigm that there's a model for goodness. And so what we see is God has a plan. And as we're learning from God and walking in that plan, it requires the ability to exist in a world where things keep interrupting and seeking to undermine the plan, and don't get undermined by it. Stay with God's purposes, follow him, and then patiently figure out what it looks like to grow and to mature and to be able to handle and respond. So, God's plan. Here's the second thing I want to talk about is God's patience. As we see in this parable, it's a parable that involves time. And Jesus is preparing us for the reality that the kingdom has begun substantially with his arrival, but it's a plan that's unfolding over thousands of years. And so it requires patience. And it's that patience that we see here in verse 28 and 30. The servants say, what do you want us to do about these weeds? Should we go and gather them? Verse 29, the answer is no. And in 30, he says, let both grow together until the harvest. So it's not that he doesn't care. It's not that he's apathetic. It's not that he can't do anything. He's committed to the growth, so let them grow together until the harvest. And at the harvest time, I will tell the reapers, gather the weeds first, bind them into bundles to be burned, and gather the wheat into my barn. And so God is patiently needing to deal with this new reality. His goal is to fulfill his plan. He has a plan to get there. And along the way, we just have to navigate this. So the picture that the harvest in the parable of Jesus' explanation, verse 39, the harvest is the end of the age. So that's what Jesus is saying is the kingdom of heaven will be realized in its thorough fullness in some future day. So come now, start to experience that reality, align with it, walk in it, so that's your future. But not only will it be your future, but it will start to be your present. And then you become salt and light in the world, that you'll live in this world where it's mixed with good and evil, but you're devoted to the good, and therefore you're bringing more of that good. But there's this until the harvest, this reality that we need to be patient. And it's that impatience that often sidetracks us. It's the impatience that makes us lose sight of the good that we're supposed to do and get bent on, just participating in the evil. And here the patience is because God knows he will bring things to completion. So along the way, what's the plan that best gets us there? And it's that patience that we need because we live in a world where good and evil still coexist. Sometimes we can't tell the good from the evil. Sometimes we can, and we don't know how to fix it, or we don't feel like we're able to. And the way that we get lured in by the slanderer, the deceiver, is through the self-loathing, the lack of confidence. I'm not good enough. The hasty decisions to do something quick that you think will fix it, and it doesn't fix it, or you burn out by using too much energy at once and not playing the long game. That patience is needed. There's a prayer that has become sort of popular, a short prayer called the Serenity Prayer. And it holds the tension of the reality of life in this world. So the Serenity Prayer, the thought is that a 20th century theologian named Reinhold Niebuhr probably formulated the original version of that. Niebuhr incidentally did teach at Union Seminary, so my guess is he probably taught in this classroom. Just as some of us are like, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, when he was a student in New York, he must have been in James Chapel. So here we are following the footsteps of famous thinkers. And so Niebuhr had this prayer that then people took hold of, and he revised it with a little bit more theological richness, but it's come into the concise form that you may be familiar with. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Who really gravitates towards that prayer? Well, that prayer, among other places, has become sort of the anchor of Alcoholics Anonymous. So why an addiction recovery community? Why would that prayer be meaningful? Lord, grant us this grace, this serenity to accept what we cannot change, but to change what we can. Well, because it's a community that's realized we got those things entirely wrong. And by the time somebody needs a support group for recovery, they've done damage. But by the time you say, you know what, my alcoholism has reached a point where I can't manage it on my own, there's usually a financial cost to that. There's relational hurt within families. You've damaged your body. The expectation of, like, now that I know it, I'm going to conquer it. Often you get there thinking you could conquer it, and I'm just going to hide this aspect of it. I'm just going to make excuse for this. And it's when you realize that in your own effort, you've only made a greater mess. The logical thinking that most people have from that is, I'm a complete incompetent human being. There's nothing I can do. And that prayer helped me to accept this reality. Lord, there's already a mess that I can't fix. And I've learned to respond to the things that I can't fix with avoidance. And so I found something that actually made the problems worse. So actually now I'm going to need to learn to accept I've made enough of a mess, and I will not be able to undo some of the hurt or the harm. And then most people are like, then there's nothing to do. But actually, you need to accept what you cannot change. That's just the truth. It's reality. But accepting it doesn't mean you do nothing. It doesn't mean you not only stop making excuses for it, but you actually do the things you need to do. And so give me the ability to make the changes that I can change. And then it's that wisdom to know the difference. Because that's the thing that gets confusing in this world. What am I responsible and what am I not responsible for? We all tend to get that wrong. And a community like a recovery community is willing to provide the support to say, you know what, we're gonna be so committed to honesty, we're gonna admit that we made mistakes and we're gonna accept it, but we're not gonna accept the current reality as the only reality, but we're gonna do the work to change what can be changed. And so let's take responsibility. And it's that shift that has made that prayer that in the reality of this desperate world where there are things that we hate that we don't know that we could do anything about, what do? Well, Lord, if I just need to accept this, help me to accept it. But if I could change it, help me to change it. I don't know what to do. And that's so much of where we live. And that is where I think this parable is reminding us. We live in a world where sometimes you can't tell what's good and evil. Sometimes you can, but you can't do anything about it. So what do? Do you do nothing? Do you just accept your circumstances? No. You become a disciple. And that really is the picture that Christians have come to. One of the ways we've articulated about the nature of Christian life is we're sinners saved by grace. There's a sense in which all of us say on our own, we need this higher power, but it's not the generic higher power, but it's the very specific power of the God of the Bible and his gospel. And we need the community, and so we need truth, we need reality, and we need to accept that maybe what I want in life I can't fully have, or maybe something happened that I did not want, but it happened. So how do I accept it? But Lord, what are the things that I can change? And so teach me and give me the strength and lead me and protect me so that I would not fail to do what I should do. Help me not to do things that are harmful. And that's where so much of the Christian life exists. And sometimes there are highs where things are wonderful and there are lows where things are terrible. But for most of us, we exist in this world where things can be a bit confusing. And this parable reminds us that if the confusion gets where you start to go towards the low, you don't need to sink and stay there. But by grace, you could own, Lord, I'm going to take responsibility for this. I was confused. I made a mess. I believed the slanderer. And look what I've done. I can't fix it anymore. But Lord, are you really gracious? Will you receive me? Will you change me? Despite the mess that I made, will you get me out of it so that my future is better than my present? And that's the Christian message. Jesus says, yes, that's the kingdom of heaven. Come and join that. And it's a kingdom of transformation. Is it instantaneous? No. Is it glorious? Yes. Is it perfect? Is it fun all the time? No, it involves challenges and struggles, but that's where Jesus is equipping us, not simply for life in this world, but to get through the world that we will have an impact and to wind up whenever God is done with this world, to have a place that is the realization of all that we're longing for. And so it requires patience. This parable reminds us along the way, discouragement, confusion, things you can't make sense of. What are you going to do? Don't believe the slanderer. Don't give up on the one who speaks the truth and is with you, but stay committed to the King and to the kingdom and continue to do that work. So, God's plan, God's patience, and the last thing I want to talk about, God's wisdom. It's hard to recognize God's wisdom when things are so confused, when things are complicated enough that we can't make sense of it. And the parable is showing at the end of the day, not only will God be vindicated to show that he fulfilled what he always intended, but he also dealt with evil in a way that not only dealt with it so that it's gone, but along the way, it didn't completely destroy everything. And that's where the humility we need to exist in situations to say, God, this is what I would do if I were you, and I can't understand why you're not doing that. To be able to say, but somehow I need to continue with that God while this doesn't make sense. That's a real challenge. But is God wise? Does God know what we don't know? And ultimately, is what he's doing in the present part of his plans and purposes that we may never understand to get us to a place in the future where we will say, thank you, Lord. And that wisdom is what we see in this vision of the end. There is a future harvest. So there's a present reality of wheat and weeds overlapping. The work of the farmer is now harder. You need to figure it out. But he has a plan to get to this end. And so verse 26, when the plants come up and bore the grain, the weeds appeared also. Things become clear. With the ministry of Jesus, Galatians uses the language of Jesus comes in the fullness of time. Whatever confusion there was, Jesus comes and he starts to bring clarity. He's starting to train people. Look at your hearts. Look at the religious leaders. Look at the kingdoms of the world. In the arrival of Jesus and his kingdom, things start to become clear so we could start to see the difference between the wheat and the weeds. And yet we're not yet able to do anything about them. So there's something about Jesus' arrival that's clarifying, and yet, so we gain wisdom, but there's still a future. So verses 41 to 43, what will this Son of Man, as Jesus speaks of himself, do? Well, one day he will send his angels. They will gather out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all lawbreakers. And then verse 43, then the righteous will shine. So the tension we have, on the one hand right now, many of us read a parable like this about a future destroying those who are evil, and it troubles us. Lord, is there no compassion? How could this be? Like, what is the measure of how much you could get wrong that people will be held accountable in a way that there's destruction? And then in the present, somebody does something terrible. Lord, how could you allow that person to do that? And there are these things that we can't hold together that Jesus says, in the end, God's justice will prevail, that somehow he is not ignoring evil, he's not apathetic, he will deal with it decisively, but he will deal with it in a way that allows a remainder, people who have been brought out of it. And it's that complexity that we can't imagine. What does it look like for God in his holiness to govern our mixed world where an enemy has come in to bring evil? How will God get us out of it? There's not easy answers. So the parable doesn't answer all of our questions. The parable reminds us, expect that this world will be mixed and that God is being patient and you need to stay with it. But what do you do about that idea that one day the angels will gather out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all lawbreakers? So it's not just sin, but sin takes root in people who then act on it. He will destroy the sin and he will destroy the sinner. That's terrible. Is there not a better plan than for God to destroy everything that he has made? And the remarkable thing about the picture is not that God is so patient waiting to the end, because if you have trouble watching this world and all that's wrong with it, could you imagine the holiness and wisdom of God, who's observing people who are so blatantly doing what he warns us not to and bearing the consequences of it? God's patience is something that should strike us. But God's wisdom in that to get to the end where he can make a separation and not destroy everyone is that something happens in the middle of history, which is Jesus doesn't come simply to announce that there is an end, but he comes into history to prepare a people for that end. And what's remarkable is if the thing we're longing for is that one day God would gather out of this world all sin and all lawbreakers, but we find that the Christian message is, but sin is pervasive. It's in all of us. We are all sinners. We are all lawbreakers. So what are the implications if God is going to gather all of it out of the kingdom? And then Jesus comes, and he comes to his kingdom, Jerusalem. He's from the line of David. He announces good news and offers an invitation. And then the very people who should have received him start to slander him. They treat him as though he's the one sowing weeds into their community when he's the one identifying the weeds and calling people out. And so what happens is Jesus, in his perfection, comes, and he is slandered, he's accused, and then he is dragged out of Jerusalem and crucified. And he oddly says, follow me. Follow me, you that rejected the crucified one. Well, what am I doing? I'm gathering out of my kingdom all sin, and I'm gathering it to myself. So I'm going to go to the cross as if I was the sinner, and I'm going to bear the sin, its misery, the penalty of it, all of the awfulness. I am the one who's going to bear it. So not only am I drawing sin out of this world, but I'm calling sinners out of it. So he's crucified between two thieves. One of them is going to mock, the other one says, remember me. And Jesus says, you will come into my kingdom. And so the invitation is here. He will draw sin to himself and bear the misery of it so that he can draw sinners to himself. All of us who are invited with our flawed, imperfection, mixed pasts and current realities, we're told there is grace. You can come, you could enter a kingdom where there's grace and there's healing and there's goodness. And it's as we grasp the fact that Jesus did, in order to prepare us for the end, so we don't need to fear the future, but we could long for it, that Jesus comes and did the thing that we're terrified of on our behalf. It's grasping that grounds us in the ability to patiently endure the confusion. Lord, I don't know why this has happened. I know you're sovereign. So did you allow it? Did you approve of this? Every one of us goes through that. And the character to say, the one thing we could say is, God is not powerless. He's not apathetic. God knows our suffering more than we do because Jesus Christ came and suffered. It's that allows us to say, okay, Lord, I'm currently not able to make sense of things, but I'm not going to listen to the slanderer who says I'd be better off leaving you, but I'm going to recognize if you did this, I'm going to stay. And so, Lord, help me to get through this. And that skill is hard to acquire. We don't have it. It takes discipleship. It takes patience to gain the wisdom where we have to exist in this world, to take hold of all that's good, but to endure the reality of all that's not good and trust that Jesus is presently with us, presently at work. And it's the kind of thing that a simple faith gets you there, but there are always examples of people who, through very complicated processes, wind up with that simple reality. I can't make sense of it, but I know that I can trust God because Jesus gave himself for me. An example of that, there's a book that came out some years ago by a guy named Nicholas Walterstorff. So he was a philosopher. He was a Christian in the Reformed tradition, but he taught philosophy at Yale until he retired. He had a 25-year-old son who died in an accident. So he writes a book called Lament for a Son. So here's a philosopher who's not writing a philosophical book. He's not writing a theological book. He's writing a sort of a memoir of processing his experience of grief. Because of his background, if you teach philosophy at an Ivy League school, you can't get away with publishing a book with weak answers. There's nothing simplistic in that. As he goes through, the reality is now he's dealing with his own grief. He's very aware of the quick and easy things are not comforting me. There's no quick solutions. And yet what he comes to through it is, but the thing that comforted me, the thing that sustained me, the thing that brought me through the worst And once I'm out of it, I'm not clean, I'm not perfect, there's still grief, there's still sorrow. But the thing that brought me to a better place is the awareness that Christianity doesn't simply present a God who's powerful or who hates evil, but a God who himself knows it in a way that makes the suffering, confused person know where to turn, to find comfort, and that there's somebody trustworthy to walk with it. So all of those degrees, all of that wisdom, and he came to the place that the ordinary Christian is, which is, I can't explain it, but I know that I need to walk with God in it. So I'm going to read just a brief quote from that book where he talks about these are the kinds of words that any of us could say and that he himself did in his reflection. He says, "How is faith to endure, O God, when you allow all this scraping and tearing on us? You have allowed rivers of blood to flow, mountains of suffering to pile up, sobs to become humanity's song, all without lifting a finger that we could see. You have allowed bonds of love beyond number to be painfully snapped." Sorry, this is his experience, not mine, but it's real. "If you have not abandoned us, explain yourself. We strain to hear, but instead of hearing an answer, we catch sight of God himself, scraped and torn. Through our tears, we see the tears of God." That's not an explanation. This is an extremely smart, informed person saying, when I came up with no explanation, in my misery, I saw the goodness of God. And that's what I held to. That's what comforted me. That's what sustained me. That's what brought me through. And that's what my present hope is. He didn't abandon faith, but he found the depth of his faith. And this parable reminds us we have to live without being able to have everything explained to us. God cannot give us answers for every question, but we need to know there's a slanderer that's going to confuse you. And so Genesis 3, God doesn't want you to have knowledge. There's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It was slander. God wanted them to have knowledge. He gave them instruction, but more than that, he wanted them to have wisdom. If you want a quick answer for this moment, be careful. But if you want to be trained for the kingdom, for righteousness, well, then stay with God, because he is going to continue to teach you. He will give you the knowledge that's not just information, because at the end of the day, you need more than information. You need the one who is wise and who is with you and who will train you and he won't abandon you. So don't believe the slanderer, but stay with the one who is good. And that's what Christianity presents to the suffering. Not an answer to explain why a particular thing or particular things happened, but a God who knows your grief and who will show grace to you and will be with you in your misery. We know this because he didn't have to send Christ, but he did, because he was committed to making sure that sinners can be saved by grace, that all of us can have a place in that eternal kingdom. Not that we earned it or deserved it, but somehow God will deal with the sin in our lives in ways that we cannot. So we take responsibility and say, Lord, I've done it, I'm helpless, and here's Jesus Christ, the gift. And when we understand that it's not simply a way out of future consequences, but it's the way forward with the present difficulties, then as we get in tune with the heart of God, we're prepared for life in this world with good, but also evil. And so stay with God and his good. Commit yourself to that and be patient as you figure out how to manage and address the evil in your life. That's the way of wisdom. Let me pray for us. Our Father, even this effort to talk about this, to reflect on this, to take this simple parable and figure out what it means for today, we know that for some of us it's too much. We don't get it, and we're still afraid, we're still angry, we're still resentful. Lord, but we're grateful that you are patient with us. We're grateful that you're training our souls to be different in this world. Grant us the grace to be patient as well, so that we would gain true wisdom, to live in this world so long as you give us days, to experience your goodness, to magnify it, to share it, and also to know when we need to act swiftly against evil, when we need to patiently endure it, and when we just need to wait to figure it out. Lord, thank you that you still govern the universe, and we entrust our lives to you. And for any who are here who are having trouble with faith at this moment, be patient, be gracious. Lord, cleanse us of all sin and help us to see what is true, and help us because we need it. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.